Okay, this video is going to be looking at gaps. So I learned about gaps, and I noticed that there's a difference between a daily gap, a day gap, or a gap on the daily chart versus a gap on the 15-minute chart. And there's even a different gap when there's an earning gap. So Tesla has quite a few gaps. So I'm just gonna go through and mark up some of these recent gaps. So let me remove some of these quickly. Remove. We don't have so many things going on. Then I can focus on all the gaps that we have on Tesla. So I won't remove my demand and sell zones for what I use on my everyday charting. So I'm just gonna focus on the gaps. So a gap is where there's a space between one candle, like one day the candle is up and the next day there's a space and it goes down. Or here where one day the candle is at 261 and then it jumps on the Wednesday to 277. So there is no candle in this space and it's moving from 260 to 275, 276. So this is what you call a gap. So we'll mark this one, and we mark the body of the lower candle and the upper candle to indicate the gap. Here we have it. This is Wednesday, the 19th of July. And then on the Thursday, we notice that there's a gap right here. So there's a space or a gap between the numbers from one day to the next. So I'm gonna put this one here because these are pretty close. So this is the gap for this one, and this is the gap for these two. Then right here, right here we have another gap, and then okay. So these are the most recent gaps. There are a lot of gaps on Tesla. So we're just gonna analyze each gap and see what happens when there is a gap. So let us look at January 2023. Gaps are very strong resistance area or support area. They act as resistance or support. So in this case, we have the bottom of the gap starts here and then it jumps on the Thursday. So it was on the Wednesday, trade overnight, jumped it up to, gapped up to on the Thursday. Okay, so we have a difference of 144 to 159. So that is a significant gap. So we notice that once it gapped up, it's a strong gap and the stock continue to move up to the daily support that I had drawn here. It hit this level, came down off of that resistance demand zone, went back to that demand zone, and then it came down strongly. And where did it come back to? It come back right to this gap region. So this is acting as a resistance turn support area now. So that's how we know that this is a strong gap. And every time the stock comes back to this area, it bounces off. So here is the first move. Gap up, move all the way up from one support region to a daily resistance region. Then this area is strong, so it had sellers coming all the way back to this strong resistance turn support region, which is from the gap. So gaps act as strong demand and support zones. So once it got down to this area, it barely touched the area, and then you can see a reaction right there. Then it moved back up to the same resistance zone that we had. It, it went in the first reaction. So here we go again, back to the resistance zone, and then it came back down. On the second, when it came back this third time, because this was I guess I can call this the first move, second move it bounced off. Second time it still didn't close the gap completely. It entered the gap to about 50% and then it reacted. Because what happened is that these are buyers sitting here. In this gap, we have a lot of buyers buying orders sitting here. So once the stock comes back to this number between this 144 and 159, there are buyers sitting here. And you can see that the sellers came in and then the buy orders just move the stock up strongly. Lots of buyers even break the resistance right there. So you can see that the buyers were really in control, and all because of this strong gap being formed here, which is a buyer's gap. Or you know it's a buyer's gap because buyers are in this area. This is a buy candle, and then it moves the price. So if when the price gaps up, it's a buyer's gap. If the price moves down, it's a seller's gap. So you see where it's Wednesday to Thursday. So one day, the day that it gapped up is the next day. So it moved from low to high, and then you know that there's a buyer. These are buyers sitting in this area. Here you can see where this is Wednesday, 19th of April, and then this is the Thursday, the following day. So the price was at 180 and it came down to 160. So what happened here is that the price didn't fill this gap immediately. You see that it took several days for this gap got filled. So it started on the Thursday, which is the 20th of April. Then we had, let's just increase this. Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It went into that gap again. So it took 2 weeks actually before the price entered that gap again. So the gap was a seller's gap because the price was at the high of 179 and then it fell to 167. Sellers are the ones that create this gap. So in this space, there are sellers. So we have sellers pushing this price down, 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 down. But if you look to the left, you notice that there's also this gap here, which is acting as resistance in this area. So we have a gap at the top, we have a gap at the bottom, right? So these sellers are pushing the price down, these buyers are pushing the price up, but the buyers are stronger for sure. So when they entered this buyer's gap, it didn't take them very long to take everything under control and just push out, push, push right out of this area. So you notice that there was no way to close this gap completely because Tesla has a strong buy. This is a strong buyer. There are a lot of buyers in this price range for Tesla. So the sellers were not able to push it all the way down to 144. They took control here, the buyers took control after about 2 weeks. Then it went all the way up, up, up to went all the way up until 274. So this was a good, strong buying. The buyers were totally in control. Okay. Then let's look at sellers again. So here we are at the top range of Tesla. In the 300 zone is a strong, it's a seller's haven. Okay, the sellers are in control here. So you see on Wednesday, July 19th, it gapped down on Thursday. So we have Wednesday, then we have Thursday. There's a gap created there. And what happened is that it was from 290.50 and it came down to 280. That's like a 10 point drop, right? So gap down, sellers are in control, came back to this two to the 200 region, let's call it 210 region. And you see where we have this is resistance and support right here. So it hit this region there, here, breakthrough there, but it came back to this zone, and we can see where the buyers are also in control. Resistance turn support, and then it pushed back the stock up to the 277 region. And why did it turn back here? Give you a few seconds to tell me why you think the stock turned back right exact at this 278, 280 region. If you look to the left, this is where our seller's gap is. So we have sellers sitting in this little gap. And once we have sellers sitting there, if the stock comes back to this area, what is going to happen? It's going to send the stock down out of the sell zone back to a buyer's region where it will pick up more buy orders and come back to this area to retest it. So this is the this is how we do stocks. On the day chart, just be mindful that gaps are powerful support and resistance zones. Always identify your gaps by knowing if it's a seller's gap or a buyer's gap. Here we have a seller's gap. So sellers are here. So when the stock retest this area, the sellers will send the price back down for support region. when we have a buyer's gap, right? Buyer's gap is right here. So it will not always fill the same time, but this buyer's gap is more or less in a it's more or less in a sell zone, I must say, because sellers are more in this area. So when it was gapping in this area, it's a whole different ball game because it filled fairly fast compared to the seller's gap. Buyer's gap in this area not very well. Buyer's gap in this area. Where was our buyer gap? Buyer's gap down in this area work very well because you have way more buyers in this area, which is the 150, 144 region, price region, versus you would have way less buyers sitting down here versus buyers in this area. So we have more sellers in here, so the sellers will fill the gaps faster in this area. So we see where it took was created June 30th, July 3rd, and then it went up, but wasn't a strong move up. And then you have the sellers coming in, and they came down to about 3/4 of it, and then it finally pushed up. But then the sellers took control and completely filled this. So just be mindful of where your gaps are formed. If your seller's gaps are formed in a seller's haven or seller's zone, then expect your sellers to jump in and do their thing. This is what happened here. Sellers gap formed, sellers are in control. Buyers gap formed, buyers are in control. Push the price up. So going forward, where are we right now? Okay, so this is gaps, daily gaps. So I just look at daily gaps today in this video. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope this video was informative. I have been studying gaps and I've lost a lot of money on gaps. So I just wanted to share the video. You can watch it over and over and do your back testing and see exactly what I am pointing out in this video. Okay, thank you. Thanks for watching. Bye.